Hi everybody, hi all the Disney fans out there. My name is Don Hahn. I am a producer and filmmaker that was lucky enough to produce films like Lion King and Beauty and the Beast. I just finished directing a movie called Waking Sleeping Beauty that's out in cinemas near you. And also pretty excited about Beauty and the Beast coming out on Blu-ray and DVD. So I have a couple of questions from you all out there. Love our fans, can't exist without you. So thanks for asking these questions, and here's some answers. Hope they help. It was a period of time between 1984 and 1994 that was a really unique time at Disney, where movies like Roger Rabbit and Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King all came out of that period. And not only the movies, but some really interesting people like Tim Burton, John Lasseter, Brad Bird, Ron Clements, John Musker, all those people came out of that period. And it seemed like a really great story to tell. About 20 years had passed and I had lived through that period, and I thought, before we forget it, why don't we go back and tell the story about that unique period when all those people and circumstances came together to make those great movies. The movie started with a coffee I had with Peter Schneider, who was the head of animation during that time in the 80s and 90s. And originally we were going to go out and interview directors, and we did. We talked to a lot of different directors, and finally, in a moment of pure ego, I said, I really should tell this story because I lived it, I was in the middle of it, and Peter was supportive, and we ended up I ended up directing it myself. I felt strongly about the story, and I felt like I knew how to tell this story myself. And so I pushed off in that direction and ended up making the movie myself. There's been a lot of golden eras in animation. I mean, certainly when Walt Disney was making movies in the late 30s, like Snow White, Pinocchio, and then again in the 50s, Cinderella, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland. But this was a real crossroads. You had people that had worked with Walt Disney, the great animators, the 9 Old Men, Ward Kimball, Frank Thomas, Ollie Johnston, were all leaving the studio and at the end of their careers. And then you had a new group of animators like Glenn Keane and Andreas Deja, Mark Henn, John Lasseter coming into the studio. So this period of time was a real crossroads of generations. And because of that, there was a lot of sharing of information, there was a lot of learning going on, but there was also a lot of tension going on, and it made for a very dramatic time. And of course, out of that dramatic time was a lot of chaos, a lot of joy, and a lot of great movies came out of that period from the 80s and 90s, and that's why it was worthy to tell that story. I found out a lot of surprising things I didn't know when I started directing the movie. First of all, how much food animators consume while they're making movies. It seems like every clip I found was animators eating donuts and pizza and drinking. The other thing, though, seriously, is a lot of the joy that we experience making the movies. Yes, there's a lot of hard work. Yes, there's a human toll. Some people, we missed our families. We had to be away for a long time, or you would get carpal tunnel disease from having to draw so much, and your hand would shake when you were holding a coffee cup. There were tensions between executives, and a lot of those things we didn't realize. But now, looking back 20 years or so, you have some distance, and you can look at that story with a little more objectivity and see what that time was. And I think that's what I learned more than anything is to look with fresh eyes back at those tensions and those joys and those celebrations of what it was like to make movies like Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Lion King.
Is there any difference between then and now?
No. The difference between that era and the era today in animation is this. Everything's changed and nothing's changed. The technology is completely different. Everything about the way animated movies are made, the approach to animation has changed technically, but what hasn't changed is it's all about storytelling, and it's all about making great characters. So whether you were an animator sitting at the Disney studios in 1937 working on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or whether you're an animator sitting at Disney Studios working on a film like Toy Story 3, it's about great stories, and it's about creating a wonderful, transportive experience in the movie theater. And that hasn't changed. That's a tale as old as time. That comes from the Greek theater, and telling good stories is something we'll always want and need as human beings. When I first arrived at Disney, it was 1976. It was a small family-run company. It was a great place to work. Everybody held the door for everyone else. Everyone knew each other by their first name. You played volleyball at lunch. You throw a frisbee around at break time. And it was a very collegial, like a campus or a country club atmosphere. It's a great place to work. Oddly, it still is. Is the company different? Yeah, it's vastly different. It's a larger corporation now with interests in a lot of different areas. But in a lot of ways, it's still about the people. And a corporation doesn't mean anything if the people aren't interesting and engaged. And so I think the one thing that's consistent between 30 years ago when I started and now is that the people at Disney are extraordinary. And whether they're making a television program or animation or covering a sports event or whatever, these people love what they do. And I think that's always what's made Disney a special company, is you're getting people that are passionate about what they do and want to share that experience with the audience. So different company, yeah, completely. The same ethics and the same culture. It's a culture of quality, a culture of innovation, and that's what makes Disney better than the rest. I don't know. It has been 20 years since the story that I tell in Waking Sleeping Beauty. Is there a new golden era at Disney? Yeah, I mean, it's a different time now. I think it's a huge boom time at Disney Pixar right now. And if you look at the movies being made, first of all, you get a couple movies a year. Rapunzel is coming out, Toy Story 3, Cars 2. You get some really great movies from John Lasseter. And that is a new golden age. You also see in animation in general, directors like James Cameron making films like Avatar, Steven Spielberg, Peter Jackson working on animated movies, Bob Zemeckis working on animated movies. So the animation industry is more than just a few people in a warehouse now. It's a global way of telling stories that I think is much different and kind of a new golden platinum era, if that's possible, for the animation industry. It's a great time. It's a great time where filmmakers are learning to use animation in their toolbox to tell great stories. I should answer the second part of that question too, but I don't want to. And is animation in 2D or 3D or I don't know. I think the funny thing is we all believe, and certainly John Lasseter and our leadership at Disney Pixar believes that animation's about great stories. And it doesn't matter if you do that story with a pencil or a pixel and a keyboard or a puppet. It doesn't matter. I think people love to go to the movies, and if the story's good and the characters are interesting and the director has told a story in a new way, you'll enjoy it and you'll have a great time at the movies. So it's not about the technique, it's about the story. There's a number of shorts we produced a few years ago for a new Fantasia, actually. We wanted to put together a Fantasia based on world music. And we made some wonderful pieces, one based on Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Little Match Girl, one based on some Argentinian tango music called Lorenzo. Luckily, those were all made for Fantasia, and they're coming out on the Fantasia Blu-ray disc later this year. So as we approach the holidays, I think if you keep your eyes and ears open, you'll see a great re-release of the original Fantasia, along with Fantasia 2000, along with 3 or 4 amazing shorts that were made for Fantasia but have never been seen before. And that includes Destino, the great collaboration between Salvador Dali and Walt Disney. So I think there's some great surprises in your Christmas stocking this year. No, a producer is interesting. Everybody has their personal style, and I always say a producer is probably closest to a coach on a sports team. You're not out there running the ball around or calling the plays, but you're the first person on, you're the last person off the field. You're trying to put together a team that's going to tell a story, and you're trying to rally that team to be the best they can be. And that's the same whether I'm working on a film like Beauty and the Beast or a live action movie or anything. You're really trying to get the best people you can and then help them do their job. And there's an old saying like that, in fact, that a producer hires the best people he possibly can and then does exactly what they tell him to do. And I think that's what a producer does. That's certainly how I approach the job. Yeah, it's funny. We never, as an audience, we don't exist in a vacuum. We're always inspired by other people's films. And when I was a kid, I was really inspired by the films of Chuck Jones and Tex Avery and Jay Ward and even Walt Disney. And I think kids today are the same way. I mean, it's an amazing time to be a kid because you have access to all those movies. If I wanted to see a movie by Walt Disney, I had to wait for years till it came out in the cinema. Now you can rent that movie or you can see it and have it in your home. And you can also make movies. I have a daughter who, you can go out on the weekend, you can rent or get a video camera and a laptop and you can make a movie and release it all in the same weekend. So I think it's a really interesting time. I think Disney animation has always been inspiring to audiences everywhere. And if we keep making great movies at the highest level, I think it'll always be inspiring to young filmmakers. And someday those young filmmakers, I hope, want to come and work at Disney and make their movies at the Walt Disney Studios just like I did one day. I mean, that's what's great about the studio, is it requires new and exciting points of view and great new talent. And I think that's always what we look for at Disney Studios, is who's that next great filmmaker and what's that next great way to tell a story. All right, thanks everybody. Great questions. Hope the answers help. And we always appreciate our Disney fans out there, especially in France. You guys are huge fans of animation, and we always love to make these movies for you. So until next time, I'm Don Hahn. See ya.
Well, here it starts. He starts establishing the rhythm. Clams take it off, and oysters, and he's feeding on lobsters, whatever.
At the Walt Disney Studios from 1984 to 1994, a perfect storm of people and circumstances changed the face of animation forever. But it almost never happened.
Here it is, April 9th, 1980. This is the past to all you folks out there. And we're going to go inside and see what it's like. Come on.
Revisions. 100 drawings go in the trash.
The fact is that the last couple of animated movies made were not particularly good.
That year, we were beat out at the box office by the Care Bears movie. We knew we hit rock bottom when the studio told us that we were being kicked out of our own building.
I think after that meeting, we all kind of said, we're going to make great films.
The work was intense, the hours were long, and there was only one thing that could stop it all: margaritas.
This crew is the best crew. It's fabulous.
Can you really do what you want to do in animation?
We have to do in this company. That is our legacy.
From the producer of The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast comes the true story of the players.
Hi, Tim.
This is Tim Burton. And who are you?
I'm John Lasseter.
He's the cameraman.
And the passion.
The real heartbeat of this company was, is, and will always be the film business.
That fueled one of the greatest comebacks in entertainment history.
And the winner is Beauty and the Beast.
Told by the people who were actually there.
We were a group of artists living the dream. We went from hitting rock bottom to creating the most successful films ever. This is the story of how we got there.
Waking Sleeping Beauty.